all of my early life, I wanted to be a comic book artist. That was always my goal. But at the time in the 80s and 70s, you had to live in New York and try and get work there. And it's like, I'm here in Los Angeles with no money. There's no way I could do that. But I had friends that were working in the industry at Hanna-Barbera. Like Rick worked at Hanna-Barbera when I was fixing computers for a living. And he kind of told me, hey, yeah, come on, get in animation and you can draw and get paid for drawing. So when I got my first job was at Filmation, I tried to be a layout artist. That was they had a job, fair, sort of like, come on in, we need layout artists. So I gave it a try and I took the test twice, failed it twice. My anatomy wasn't as good as it should have been. But the fellow who saw my work in my portfolio, he also saw that I did a lot of my own comic book pages where I was telling stories, my own stories. So he introduced me to the head of storyboards to give me a test in that department, which he gave me the model sheets and paperwork. And I took it home and brought it back the next day, which actually impressed him. And what I didn't realize was the test he gave me was actually a page of script that everybody was working on that floor. But he liked my work so much, he actually put it into the show. And then I got hired the same day. And that's how I got into animation, to be a storyboard artist. And I was there for about a year, I think, ish. And then I left there to go to work with Stan Lee at Marvel Productions. And I was there for about the next 10 years.
When you were starting, which were your favorite storytellers?
In comic books, my storytellers that I really were impressed by was Jack Kirby, John Buscema, Gil Kane. Those are the people that I really like their storytelling. In terms of animated films, it was the director Hayao Miyazaki from Japan. His movies were just starting to come over into America, and me and my friends would go to Little Tokyo and buy these gigantic laser discs, and we bring it back to work or at home, and we would just watch his stuff over and over and over again because it was so impressive that he could tell a story. And even though the laser disc, it was not subtitled, it's all Japanese, but his storytelling was so clear, you knew about 80% of the story by just watching it. And the other 20% is like subtext that you got to hear what the characters are actually talking about. But his storytelling was so clear, and he also was able to convey 3D motions with 2D drawings, hand drawings. And so that's something that I incorporated into my work from that point forward to try and add that type of anime approach to my storytelling. So I was blending it most of my life, was blending the comic book part and the Miyazaki part together to create the storyboards that I've done over the years.
Concerning, for example, Kirby, you worked with in Thunder the Barbarian.
Yes.
Kirby, Alex Toth. So how was that for you as a fan?
As a fan, it was great. I mean, Thunder was so fun to work on. You got to work, you had these Jack Kirby drawings and characters. You had some Gil Kane, some Alex Toth, and you had this wild adventure of this guy, being like Conan kind of with a sword from like Star Wars, and it was just fun to play with. And they allowed us to be as innovative visually as we could. And so we were able to basically have fun with it. And in having fun, for me, it's kind of like if I can excite the little 9-year-old kid in me with what I'm drawing, then hopefully it'll translate on the big screen to to another 9-year-old kid, watching it, and they'll be excited like I was, trying to remember what it's like, the excitement of seeing something. And it's hard to describe because that type of thrill and excitement is very intangible. It's kind of hard to put into words, but you know it if you see it, and you know it if you can feel it. And that's the kind of stuff that I like. I like to try and put into the films I work on.
Can you tell us a little bit about your early years at Filmation and the impact those years had in your career?
Working at Filmation was, what I can say back then, I was almost in heaven, because it was my first job in animation. I was getting paid to draw. I don't know how else I can tell you. I think I was maybe 24 years old. I'm getting paid to draw anything, because I had 7 years prior to that. I was fixing computers for a living. I was systems analyst for McDonnell Douglas, and so it's kind of boring. It sounds exciting, but it was kind of boring for me. And to work at Filmation, I worked on, Flash Gordon, Tarzan, not Flash Gordon. is it Buck Rogers? No, it's Flash Gordon, Tarzan, Lone Ranger, something called Black Star back in the 70s, 80s. The way the animation system worked was that you worked for 9 months, and then everybody got laid off for 3 months, and then you get hired another 9 months. It was all seasonal. And so in between the time I got laid off and I was waiting for the next job, that's when I found out about Marvel Productions hiring someone in that in-between spot, because they were doing a show called, it was a syndicated Spider-Man series, 52 episodes, and they needed more artists to fill out the last episodes. And so I got hired to work on that. My director was named Art Fratello. So he hired me to work on Spider-Man. That's how I got into Marvel. And then after that, everything just continued past that. I was working on Spider-Man's Amazing Friends and all the rest of that stuff.
Have you ever imagined that HeMan and the Masters of the Universe would leave such a gigantic mark in global pop culture?
No, I didn't, because at the time when we were working on HeMan, it was a lot of fun, but nobody knew it was going to have the long legacy, because it impressed so many kids. But I'm not surprised, because it was prior to HeMan, there was no adventure shows on television at all. Pretty much they had neutered the three networks were all comedies, or it was silly superheroes, Super Friends and stuff, where it wasn't really real high adventures like that. And when HeMan came out, the other thing that's significant about HeMan is, one, it was syndicated. It didn't go to CBS, NBC, or ABC. And because HeMan was so successul, it opened the doors to syndication on so many other things. If HeMan had never existed, there would have been no others. All the other shows like G.I. Joe, Transformers, all the rest of that stuff would never have existed without HeMan. HeMan burst the door open. It was such a huge hit. And for me, I didn't work on the HeMan cartoon show, but the HeMan toys, they used to have a comic book in the back. Yeah, I drew those. That was something, freelance work at home. And I drew, I think I drew the first 10 or 12 issues of those little comic books in the back.
I was going there. They are legendary for HeMan fans. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience? How did you get that gig, and how did you approach the characters? I have a mutual friend at the time was a guy named Lee Nordling, and he was a fellow that worked in syndication for the LA Times. Somehow he got in touch, or they contacted him about
finding artists to work on HeMan comic books. And so he called me up because he knew I like to do action adventure, and said, "Hey, do you want to do a HeMan comic book?" I said, "Sure." And so for me, that's how I got started. It was through Lee Nordling. And my training prior to working on the HeMan comic books is that I've been working on, Transformers and G.I. Joe. And my first instincts when I got the script, I said, well, there's a new character here called, let's see if I can see his name over here. There was a new character that the writer wrote that wasn't a toy called, let's see if I can put it up. This guy here called Geltor. This was the very first one I drew. And so I asked I actually said, where's the toys? I got to match it to the toys. He said, there isn't any toys. So I asked him, would it be okay if I made up stuff? He said, sure. They don't have a problem with that. So at the time, Mr. T was the A-Team was popular, so that's where he came from. I made up a new bad guy for HeMan to fight. And so from that point forward, if they didn't have a toy, I just made them up. I made up an Asian character, a black character, an American Indian character. But in most cases, if they had the toy, if it involved the toy, like Modulocks and stuff like that, or what was the thing called? Stinkor?
Stinkor.
Stuff like that.
It's quite a character.
Yeah, I just had some fun with it. Like here, I think I don't even know what this guy's name is. I made him up as a guy that was like pounding he was just, look, let's see.
Yeah.
Too much glare. Okay, there is Slave City, I think. The guy's getting ready to pound him in the head. I just made him up, so okay, let me make him a bad guy that looks like HeMan can beat him up.
It's nice to see how this kind of works that I believe that in their time should be looked upon as something ephemeral.
Right.
They grabbed on to the fans and they are cherished and loved by the fans.
I'm glad that the fans enjoyed it. I never got feedback. I never knew anything that the kids liked it or didn't. I kind of drew it, turned it in. They gave me, they paid me for it, and then I got the next one. But it wasn't until maybe 10 years ago now, maybe 2010, was the first time I found out that people like those mini comic books. I had no idea. It was just, I was trying to do with the HeMan comic books was, I never got a chance to be a comic book artist. So this was my shot. So I said, okay, let me make these books exciting and adventurous, but they're going to be this small. So I had to design the story around being such a small format, but then also, try and do more Kirby, try and do more John Buscema in a very small space. And so that's where my having worked in animation and storyboarding and the mentors I like, which is Kirby and Buscema, I was able to put all of that into those little mini comic books and just have fun. I mean, that's basically what I was trying to do, is have fun. I was 25, 26 years old, so I was like, just having fun, man. Daytime I was working for Stan Lee, nighttime I'm doing HeMan comic books.
Yeah. And they remain in our imagination. And you had the most demanding audience, that it's the kids. They are absolutely honest about what they like and what they don't like.
Yes.
And if they liked it, you must have done something right. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
In your opinion, Larry, why does HeMan enjoy such a big following to this day? because
I think. Go ahead.
It remains a cult character, and sometimes it seems like he's fading away, but he's always coming back.
Yeah. I've had many different theories on it, but the one I keep coming back to is that HeMan, the zeitgeist for HeMan, for that type of action adventure show, was like the perfect time right after Star Wars and stuff like that. That you got this muscular guy, you had a catchphrase, I have the power. I mean, as simple as that sound, that's a phrase kids could go around saying, running around their living rooms, I have the power, it was like a self-empowering slogan that young kids, 5 to 10 years old could have fun with and play with it. And it really pulled you into the fantasy and made your imagination make up stuff. And a lot of the bad guys were archetypes, They were like, they were bad guys, but they were kind of goofy, They weren't really evil guys like, blood and stuff like that. No, it was more like, I won't say fun bad guys, but I'll say bad guys. They're just like archetypal bad guys that are opposing the hero, but not in a realistic fashion. And so it's kind of like the action adventure you would get out of, I'm old enough to remember the A-Team, and kind of like superficial violence, but it's not really violence, like stabbing through the heart or blood and, the kind of stuff you see today. No, it appealed to that demographics, and people who enjoyed it as a kid, they enjoyed it when they're an adult, because HeMan brings back a lot of fond memories of their best memories of that time when they grew up. I think it was just a perfect timing. The bad guys were kind of like Merman and Roboto and Stinko and all that other stuff. It was just fun stuff. It was all fun, and it's hard to, like I said, it's hard to quantify fun, but you know it when you see it. You know it when you're playing it, especially at that age.
Just to wrap up the part about Filmation,
right.
I wanted to ask you if you had any close contact with Lou Scheimer, and what's your opinion about him in regards to the history of animation and television okay. Animation?
Well, with Lou Scheimer, I would almost see him every week, not every day, but because we were working we were upstairs on storyboards, and he was somewhere on the second floor, but somewhere in another part of the building. But you'd see him like once in a while, once a week, not once a day, but maybe once in a while. I really, really liked Lou Scheimer, because Lou Scheimer was one of these guys that had a lot of money. There was no reason for him to do animated shows, but he actually liked animation. And so he liked the creating stories like this. And so he was hands-on in a lot of the creative process. And to give you an idea, back when we were, I can't remember the year, but we had a strike. The union had a strike somewhere late 70s, early 80s for the ink and paint girls was the main issue. He was on the picket line with us, trying to protect that part of the union. He was really for the artist and for the union. And his thing was he was really trying to keep the work in the United States as long as possible. And so his studio would employ hundreds of people, and we did all the animation internal to the company, to keep the work here in the States for the artists, to keep them employed. And so he did his best to do that, and he was like one of the best bosses I ever had. was Lou, because he liked artists. And he liked the art form of animation and telling stories. And so, there's so many of us who work for Lou that are very grateful for his, for what he did for the business and what he did for us, because he kept us employed when we could have been laid off. He would throw parties. We'd have fun. He was all around. He's a really good guy, and we all miss him because he was like a really a good person. So that's my impression of Lou.
In the early days of Marvel, what was the show that you enjoyed the most working at?
I would say that I had the most fun, I guess, working at was when I was working on G.I. Joe, because that was the show I started out as a storyboard artist, and then one of the directors left. He got another job somewhere else, and so they gave me the chance to be promoted to being a director, and so I got booted up to being a director on G.I. Joe, and at that point I was able to actually take to be in control of a whole show and to make that show work. And that was the beginning of me learning how to cultivate and shape an entire story. When you're a storyboard artist, they break the script down into 3 acts. And so usually I would either get, act 1, 2, or 3. And so you storyboard your little piece, but you don't have the whole picture in mind. Whereas when you're the director, I have all 3 acts I'm working with, and I gotta shape that to be the best show that I can. And so I had the most fun on G.I. Joe, although I had additional fun on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, because I got to draw Spider-Man. I don't know how else to say it, but drawing Spider-Man and drawing, some and the XMen. Sometimes they'd have guest appearances where we draw the XMen in, and that was just so much fun to visualize that onto paper. And then like 9 months later, you see it on the big screen going, wow, that's my shot. I made that one up. I made this one up, and you hear, and then you see the final mix with all the sound effects, music. You're going, wow, that was cool. And it's just the way sometimes it's just the way you visualize. I visualized it. Sometimes it's like, ugh, I won't do that again. It's a combination of those 2 things. And you learn from trial and error what works on screen and what is difficult. And so over the years, I learned what shots can an overseas company do really, really good on an average budget, and what shots a company could do with a low budget. You kind of like learn how to storyboard something exciting, but then you got to make it financially feasible. Every shot can't be Disney. So that's where the Filmation training comes in. And subsequently, different shows, you learn what to do and what not to do. And so for me, I was able to take that experience so that when I finally got the shot at directing the XMen, I was able to bring all that experience to bear on that show to make it as good as I could make it.
As I see it, you, Rick Oberg, and Will Meigniot were all fans of many of the source material you have worked with.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your collaboration and the work process back in the day?
Will Meigniot, Rick Oberg, and myself, we were all, back in the 70s, there was they used to be, this way before internet, everything was by letters. We were all friends in doing fanzines and fanzine publications like the Comic Reader, the Bias Guide, and we would be drawing stuff to be published in those books as part of articles and stuff. And we were like we would get our stuff published, we would send letters to each other. We were kind of friends that way. And so they got into the business before I did. They got into the business working on, I think it was Godzilla over at Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
And they got a chance to work with some people I wish I had at the time, but, you know, Toth and the rest of those guys, Doug Wildy, sorry, and some other people. And I was still fixing in computers. And so they're like kind of the ones who encouraged me to get out of computers and get into animation, because there's work there, you know.
I understand that you guys wouldn't rest while you had not put the X-Men into Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
What happened back then was that when the scripts would come up to be storyboarded, I would try and look to see if there was any X-Men stuff in it. And if there was any X-Men action adventures part of it, like I would say, hey guys, I want to do that part. I want to do the X-Men part, because I want to try and push the X-Men and try and make it as exciting as I could to try and get the networks excited about maybe doing an X-Men show back in the 80s. And so I would just try and punch it up as much as I could. Sometimes I was able to, like if a character's talking about, sometimes the characters would be talking about the X-Men. And they're just talking, like explain it in part of the story. Or I would change it. I'd make it into a flashback. And then I'd draw the X-Men in it, which wasn't in a script, just to do something exciting, so that the character, instead of the character just talking, going blah, 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 they start the conversation, he crosses off into a flashback, and then you come back to the character finishing her statements. And it was usually Firestar or Iceman talking about something like that. So I did my best to try and push the X-Men really early, and trying to get some excitement around it, because I really believed that the X-Men was going to be a fun show and that it would be successful. But, you know, the three of us, we were like co-directors on a show called Pride of the X-Men. And Will did Act 1, Rick did Act 2, and I did Act 3. And we tried to do our best work. We got a really, really good Japanese studio overseas to do the animation. But, you know, even with all that going on at that time, the networks didn't get it. The networks didn't get the, you know, what's a mutant? What's this? What's that? You know, it's the story's too complicated. It was like, whatever reasons they gave, it didn't click, and they all passed on it. And so that felt disappointing, but the good part, I won't say the good part, but the thing is that the two bosses at the time was Stanley and Margaret Lesh. You take that, she left Marvel. 6 years later, she was the head of Fox Kids cartoons. And so she called the three of us, along with two other people for story editors, and said, look, she had the power to greenlight a show. So she greenlit the X-Men and brought us in. And that's how we got that show on the air. It was because of her. But she greenlit the X-Men. She greenlit Batman. She greenlit Animaniacs. She greenlit The Tick. I mean, she greenlit a whole bunch of shows for Fox Kids, and it made them number one. And, you know, also the Power Rangers. Yeah. So all of that made Fox Kids, we beat all the other stations, CBS, NBC, ABC, because we had the shows that kids wanted to see.